we do want to cover the security concerns heading into the inauguration. I know, Jordan, you were at the Republican National Convention. You've seen some of these sort of massive events that have been happening recently. That was right after the assassination attempt on President Trump. And then, of course, now this is going to be coming just days after a ISIS-style or ISIS-inspired or maybe just ISIS terrorist attack in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this is not just us coming up with these theories and thoughts. I wanted to start this, kick it off early with a comment that was on Fox News yesterday by Jay Johnson, who was President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary. So take a listen to what he had to say.
We're in the midst of an evolving, heightened threat picture right now. With the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, with the attack 2 days ago, I'm sure ISIS feels emboldened right now. And we have several major security events coming up. The inauguration for one, the Super Bowl in a couple weeks after that. And I would say what I did say to my people at DHS when I was in office, don't just respond to the last attack. Anticipate the next one, which may be of a very different character. Now, we've known for some time that the possibility of an attack with a vehicle is a weapon, or a mass shooting, is something to anticipate and prepare for. We should not believe that we've seen the last of this type of vehicle attack.
There are ways, Jordan, to mitigate this. I mean, we even saw it in the sense of how airport security changed post 9/11. We have never really seen another big incident occur, at least that kind of incident occur, and a lot of it is security to go through. Is it a pain? Does it become more of a difficult situation? Sure. I mean, there are times where you get frustrated, but you have to remember where we were at 20 years ago. Now we're at these kind of events, but I know when you were there at the Republican convention, you were almost even in a bubble that was secured.
Yeah, I think that's what we have to look at for some, when we know that there's threats, and we see this starting to happen again with radicalized Americans who are already here and can easily carry out a very deadly attack just by renting a vehicle and even opening fire with a weapon. And with all the attacks and the bloodshed that has occurred really since the election and the campaign, and now leading up to the inaugural, and you said like the Super Bowl already in New Orleans again, you have to build security perimeters. In our office in Washington, D.C., we're in the security perimeter that was created after 9/11. That means that all the streets, including the one in front of ours, locked down immediately with things that come out of the ground. There is a police station with an underground, a larger station just catty corner to our office. And so we've seen when people have tried to carry out violent attacks, including using vehicles very close to our office, there were military and Capitol Hill police always ready to respond with high-powered weapons. And it's kept everyone safe. So I think we have to rethink again, putting in larger security perimeters at these events so that we feel safe. It's good for everyone. And then I don't think we have to necessarily do it for 20 years. We've learned that as well in the battle against terrorism. We can modernize and we can change. It doesn't have to be the exact same. And so I just think it's a time for real reform, and we've got to get a team in place, Logan. We don't know yet at this point if it was inspired or if he was directed, or if it's online. We know that ISIS was recruiting people a long time ago. Think about the sophistication that's changed and the abilities to do that in the last 8 years. So I think when they come to these conclusions very quickly, it's still to play a narrative like Islamic terrorism really is it a major threat in the United States? It might be happening in other parts of the world, but what we know is that when they get strongholds again in other parts of the world, that gives them the ability to spend time on recruiting Americans to carry out attacks on our soil who are already here.
And you bring up that point that, they say it was 100% inspired. Well, we know they also collected multiple phones and multiple devices from the individual that carried out the attack in New Orleans. And also there's videos online of they went through his house. They obviously went through the scene, but independent journalists gaining access to his trailer outside of Houston, not 36 hours after the attack, doing walkthrough videos in athleisure wear, not even like in a, the gumshoe journalist look, like just normal looking independent journalist walking through this attacker's home. And then you hear this from MSNBC. And this goes into what the DC mind complex has when it comes to these attacks, because they've been telling us for years that really, here's the don't look away from this shiny object. It's really the MAGA Republicans that are the biggest threat to society right now. And this is what MSNBC has the gall to air just after another, even the FBI is at least going to ISIS inspired. I think that, as you point out, they may be jumping to conclusions and need to let that play out before they know whether or not he was directed or in direct contact with an ISIS individual. But listen to how MSNBC is already spinning this to not look at what the reality is and just remember it's the conservatives that you need to be afraid of. Bite 4.
It's very difficult to feel safe when, on top of everything that Mayor Landrieu just said, you also have politicians that have a self-interest in lying about everything because it helps them with a political narrative, not concerned about the human narrative that could actually be really helpful.
And that is the tragedy of all of this, right? There are real tragedies. There will always be crime. Unfortunately, what we try to do is to keep the crime as low as possible. All different kinds of people will commit crimes. The problem here is that you jump on one sort of crime, one crime committed by one name that sounds exotic, one brown face, rather than looking at all of the domestic terror that we face, including what the FBI says, is a really big problem, which is young white men in America. We need to look at all of our domestic terrorism and say this all is a problem.
Indeed, exactly. And it is Americans that we need to be talking about.
MSNBC, Jordan, is saying that the real problem is Americans. And yes, this ISIS-inspired attacker was an American, but they're still pushing this narrative that we need to be rid of.
Yeah, this is insanity. And it's why no one's watching MSNBC anymore, because this is not living in reality. I don't hope, and I pray, that this is a one-off, these events, that ISIS has not been able to be successful in recruiting or inspiring attacks in the United States of America. But we know who the threat typically comes from in these incidents. How many times have we seen Islamic members of the military, former military, who have been radicalized and carried out attacks at their own bases so that they were easy access to get inside and kill other members of the armed forces? I mean, you just have to, again, you build a threat profile. But all they want to go back to is the white man. It's all about the white males. And white males can also be recruited and inspired by radical Islamic terrorism. So this is not about the color of the skin or the name. It's about the ideology and the organizations who have been allowed to flourish again to recruit people to carry out attacks like this.